For those of you who don't know Tim, this is Tim Medin. His talk is going to be Death by Dashboards, moving the needle on what actually matters. Tim is the CEO and founder of Red Siege Information Security. He is the creator of Cobra roasting. Tim was a senior instructor and course author of, I think it is of, what is it, SEC 560? Is that what that is?
It was the author and stuff.
I don't know if you say that any other way. Is it like SEC 560?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I'm glad we shortened that over the next 30 seconds.
Yeah, and so he was the instructor and course author of that at the SANS Institute. Tim has performed penetration tests on a wide range of organizations and technologies, and he's an experienced international speaker, having presented to organizations around the world. And he is now here to talk to you guys in Deadwood, South Dakota. So without further ado, enjoy.
Sweet. Thank you so much for the intro there. Yeah, thank you all for coming out. I appreciate you all coming to the last talk of the day. I would probably not. I don't know if you've made the right choice. We'll figure that out very shortly. Thank you all for coming. By the way, if you want to copy the slides, I do my talks backwards. You can download them anytime. redsiege.com/dash. It's kind of low there, but you can grab the slides. You can take pictures of the slides. It's better quality with the PDF, and you might get my ugly mug picture. I also like my talks to not be just a talk. I like interaction. All of you are smarter than me. And collectively, this is a very smart room. So I like the interaction, mostly because it gives me a break to get my voice back. But ask questions along the way. Bring up any insights you might have from your world. Sweet, we can skip that slide. Nice. Hater of pants, owner of the Green Bay Packers, heck yeah. Which by proxy means I own the Bears. Yeah, in social media crap at the bottom here, right? All right, good deal. All right, one of the keys to the world, fundamental truths, is managers love dashboards. Dashboards, I'm convinced, rule the world. You make the little needles move, and people get happy and you get bonuses. Right? Now, the big question is, are we using the right dashboards? Are we measuring the right things? Are we incentivizing the right way? Right? Any of you ever have like an incentive that you're like, but this is busy work, but I kind of have to get this done because the dashboard says so? I see some nodding, I see a couple of tears. A couple people said I wrote that dashboard, so it's awesome. Right? So we want to make sure, and I don't want to just pick on the dashboard, but just overall at a high level, are we doing the right things? Are we measuring them correctly? Are we incentivizing correctly? Perverse incentives and unintended outcomes from incentives are fascinating thing to do research on and discuss there. Let's take a look here we'll start off with an example here related to some of the patching and stuff. Whoops, I rearranged my slides. We'll do that in a second. Anybody else like to tweak their slides right before they go on stage? Yeah. I'm like, oh cool, I'm gonna write this. I wake up and like, change stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, surprise for everybody, including me. But we've seen this chart. Who's seen this sort of chart before? Right? We've got our urgent, are important, and it's always important to make sure that we're working on important. I love the quote here. People will remember the email that you didn't answer, but they won't remember the book that you didn't write. Where we end up focusing on the urgent stuff more so over what's actually important to you personally, to your career, to your family, to life, and not so much the urgent stuff. And we end up getting tied so much in the urgent. I'm gonna change this a little bit. I'm gonna change it to visible when it comes to what's measured inside the organization, right? Picking on the dashboards again, because it shows up in there, it now becomes urgent and important. And that's the thing that I need to focus on. The question is that the right thing that we need to focus on? Right? We always need to go back and make sure that we're focusing on, of course, on the right thing. Now we'll get to the example, or no, not quite yet. One more slide. Right? I do this to myself all the time. We want to focus on what's actually important and urgent, right? And if we can free up those things that are marked as urgent and actually aren't, and ideally even, delete or whatever delete in the bottom left here, we can free ourselves up for the things that are more important. And the things that are important that we don't have the same visibility into. And we end up so often chasing our tail with certain things. How many of you, any of you do any vulnerability management? Lots of you, right? How many of you have vuln scan results with thousands, and that's, well, hold on, I didn't even finish the sentence. with like, just a ton, especially proportionate, of criticals and highs that realistically are unexploitable and don't do anything. Now raise your hands. And somehow we have less hands. Okay, all right, whatever. Right, and we see this time and time again. My auditors, and I get these vendor management spreadsheets. I call them the spreadsheets to save the world. Where they're like, hey, you have to use TLS 1.2 or later. It's like, that's cool, that's good. But can you articulate how exactly my data is going to be lost in TLS 1.1? And they're like, well, theoretically, if someone captures 2 petabytes of data, they could decrypt 2 bytes under certain circumstances. And I'm like, cool, what 2 bytes do you want? And they're like, no, that's not the point. I'm like, well, it kind of is. Because teams end up spinning their wheels or sometimes not even doing anything because they're overwhelmed. In psychologists, I call some of that like learned helplessness. Where the team has these KPIs, right, the key performance indicators, they get bonuses based on it. Like, what is the mean time to resolution for something that is a critical or a high? Of course, the fundamental question is it? Should it be? Right? I talk to organizations all the time, and they're like, we have all of these findings. How do we fix them all? And the answer for that question is you have to hire more people. The problem is, oftentimes, it's the wrong question. We don't need to fix all of them to make ourselves more secure. What we need to do is focus on the ones that are more important, actually move the needle, not the needle that shows up in Nessus or Nexpose or whatever the hell they call it these days. But I see this time and time again where organizations are just flooded and they're like, how do we get out of this? And the answer to some degree is what takes time, but we also want to make sure we're focusing on the correct things. We got some discussions on CVSS here in a little bit here. We also want to make sure that we have a function, a way to recategorize. Just because Nessus, and I don't want to pick on Nessus, it's a fine product, but just because a tool, and a tool could be a person, right? We know plenty of tools, right? Just because a tool says it's super bad, is it? Right? Is it? And the best organizations that I've seen at actually making a difference will spend time analyzing issues and saying, hey, what is the actual risk here? What is the risk to our organization? Risk is, we sort of simplify this as impact times the likelihood. I have been pen testing for well over a dozen years. I've got tons of friends who are pen testers, and I've asked them, like, how many times have you successfully exploited one of the Apache flaws, or one of the flaws in Nginx or PHP that show up super high in our vuln scan results? And the answer is a big fat 0. And the reason is we have a lot of compensating controls. Your memory protections in your operating systems make buffer overflows for some of these things extremely difficult, extremely unreliable. More importantly, are you even using that function? Why are we patching functions that we're not even using, right? And of course, there's a discussion, well, could we in the future? We'll save that for a minute here. But how many of you have, your phone scan results looking something like this? Right? And everybody wants you to squash everything. Meanwhile, the actual bigger issues don't even show up in here. Does Nessus show you your misconfiguration in Active Directory? No. Does it tell you when users have weak passwords? No. Does it tell you when users don't have MFA enabled? No. Or systems that don't have MFA? Right? These kinds of things are missed, and oftentimes we end up focusing too much. This cameraman's working, he's doing the Lord's work today. Right, so we need to focus on this. If there is no likelihood, our risk drops sometimes even to zero or near zero, and we definitely don't want to focus on those types of things. And I'm not saying patching's not important. Don't take it as that. But what I see is organizations spend so much time on some of these issues. And I'm picking on patching here because it's the most common kind of dashboards that organizations have and will create tickets for and create metrics for because it's easy button. It's like I just import this and I create tickets and I watch people never ever resolve them, or I track their mean time to a resolution here. And we see that they're incentivized to fix these issues, and not just patching. They're incentivized to fix these because that's the incentive, not because it's actually going to make some of the big differences here. And we end up focusing on those things instead of what's actually important. Yeah, sorry, Dan?
Because it's measurable.
Because it's measurable, right? That's the big key that managers love. Let's measure everything. Well, are you measuring the right thing is the much bigger question, right? Are we asking the right questions for that?
The things that make you look good.
They're the things that make you look good, right? Boss wants to see the number of criticals and highs go down. I make numbers of criticals and highs go down. What I don't fix at that same time is the people that have crap passwords. I'm not fixing or adjusting the password policy, the MFA policy, things along those lines that are having a more significant instance in here, impact here, right? Now, what do we do here? Sort of the pushback I get is now what happens if, let's say, an Apache flaw that was realistically unexploitable. Actually, let's go back a few years. Anybody remember the RDP bug when it first came out? The something blue, what was that one called? Bluekeep, right? When that first came out, it was a denial of service. It was a denial of service, and then a few years later, we got public code in Metasploit. What we want to do is track those and then adjust over time. Like when that exploit comes out, does our risk go up? Yeah, because the likelihood has gone up significantly, the number of people using this. We also, of course, need to understand who is the adversary here, right? If you're dealing regularly, if you're in the military and you're regularly dealing with nation states, your game's a little different than the rest of us, than the vast majority of organizations, right? So focus on the important things. What we can do here is maybe you've got a ticketing system, a tracking system, if you've got the right group of people for continuous pen testing, where they're keeping an eye on these things, and then one comes out, you're like, quick, let's search our database, let's find these things, identify them, get these things escalated and taken care of, right? We want to validate too. I tell my testers all the time, we have to validate every single finding. Like make sure it's a real thing, not just a copy and paste. We have in the industry a group of people called the RCPT. Anybody heard that term before? It's the really crappy pen testers. That's where they take your Nessus output and copy pasta it into a report. The quickest way to make someone completely ignore like pen test results is to give them fake findings. We call those like false positives, right? And if you have that, someone's going to look through the list, try to validate this finding, realize it's not actually the issue. A number of years, I mean, this was ages ago, we saw a pen test report from another organization that said a system was vulnerable to MS 08067. This will date me quite a bit. But it was a remote exploit on Windows that the only reason it didn't work is if you screwed up. Like, it was stupid reliable. And if you looked further in the report, that same system had some SSH flaw. And I'm like, wait, what? How often do you see Windows running SSH servers? Yeah, that's what I thought, right? Come to find out, it was actually a Linux system. So in their report, they reported this Microsoft flaw. Now, if you could make a Linux system vulnerable to MS 08067, I mean, that's kind of, it's like running Doom on a random thing, right? But kind of cooler. But they looked through those results, and the client actually said this. It's like, yeah, we just threw away the entire report. Because this is wrong, the assumption is that everything else is probably wrong. And there's a superpower when you're doing some of these things. You can say, hey, we didn't have a way to validate these things, but here's what we got from one tool. And if you call that out, if they're like, it's not actually real, it's okay. It actually gives you credibility because you're like, you know what? We weren't 100% sure. We wanted to talk to you first. We'll more than happily remove that remove that from the reports. And now they don't throw away absolutely everything else and then ignore that for the next year and miss other things that are actually really, really important, right? How many of you love CVSS? What? I think you misheard me. But first is the group of people that give us CVSS. Now, when you're dealing with auditors and such, they'll say anything with a CVSS score of 7 or higher has to be remediated. The assumption in that question is that we're using CVSS correctly and the score is correct. I don't necessarily think that is correct on so many levels. In fact, these are quotes from First, the people who came up with CVSS, and I love this. These are direct quotes from their website. It is not recommended to use this alone to determine remediation prioritization. So if you're taking your whatever, feeding it directly from Nessus, Insight VM, Qualys, whatever the hell it is, into your ticketing system, copying and pasting the CVSS, maybe we shouldn't be doing that, right? Another one, it only takes into consideration the attributes of the vulnerability itself, not the other half of the risk equation, right? We have the likelihood and, hey, this was on like 3 slides ago, folks. What was it? Impact, right? Like, it was formerly Kenna, now it's Cisco Vulnerability Management. The branding person needs they need to replace that person. What a boring name for a product. But we take into account of some of those things. Your vulnerability management process should take into account other factors that are not part of CVSS. So blindly taking the CVSS is actually working against us because we just blindly take it, put it into our thing, and then work on it. Yes, sir?
So that was actually my point, is if you're using it correctly, it can't be released.
Yeah, okay, so that's why he loves it. He's using it wrong. Just kidding. He said, if you use CVSS correctly, it can be right. Yes, 100%. I kind of threw out the baby with the bathwater when it comes to the environmental half of the score. Like, are we adjusting based on competency controls, based on the criticality, the importance of that particular system? But that's hard. It takes extra effort. It takes some knowledge. And a lot of people are like, hey, we've got an overworked team, so we're going to skip that step. Ironically, that makes them more overworked. And you're not necessarily working on some of the correct things there, right? So I've talked about the rescoring. I worked with an organization, giant insurance organization, and they have this nailed. All of those big bugs that come out, they're like, okay, let's talk through this. Is this actually what we think this is? And on top of that, they created parameters for like different systems on whether they would add one, subtract one, nothing overly complicated. Like if it's got this kind of data, we add 1 or 2. If it has this, if it's a development system, subtract 1 or 2. If it's on the internet, we bump it up. If it's only inside, we bump it down. If it's on the sort of in between with the DMZ, we do other weird, funny, interesting things like that, right? Some issues, in fact, many issues will end up lowering the number. Decreasing, that's the word. I'm decreasing, all right. So we'll end up doing that for a lot. Some other ones will bump up. But that will also end up giving you the impact of getting rid of this very top-heavy report, shifting some of those down, bumping a couple up in the process, and then focusing on the things that actually have matter, actually have risk, actually have a likelihood times that impact, right? Another thing I highly recommend is, and this works really well if you've got multiple business units. I don't want to say, it says gamify at the bottom. Realistically, what we're doing is we're pitting them against each other. Meaning, what we do is we publish results and say, hey, look, here's our risk score for the various business units. And to sort of back up, give them bite-sized pieces. How many of you have dealt with like a business unit where you're like, hey, here's all the things you need to fix, and then next month you come back and they've done 0? I see a lot of people nodding, yep. That's why we don't do it. Yeah, we just don't do anything. It's easier, right? You don't have any vulnerabilities if you don't scan for them, right? You give them in small chunks. You give them like, hey, look, this month, there's 3 things I want you to work on. Is it gonna get all of them? Absolutely not. But you're picking now, you and your team are picking, these are the ones that have the potential highest risk. Either it's likelihood, impact, combination of both, and then they work through that. And you can give them a scorecard related to that. And next month, like, here's the next 3 things. Because if you give them 100 things, they're gonna be like, well, we can't finish the 100, so how many should we do? Sometimes it's 0, sometimes it's 1. Unfortunately, sometimes it's 0. But if you give them 3, they're like, man, if we don't do these 3 things, I feel like we're really bad. And you incentivize them to do stuff like that. You give them focus, and a lot of people need that focus. I mean, I need focus in general, but whatever, right? Use some trade-offs. I really like this for. I was talking to an organization, and we were sort of brainstorming on ideas. They wanted to move to longer passwords because length matters more than the stupid complexity requirements, right? Everybody knows if you've got a password, to make it a secure password, you add what to the end of it? Exclamation point, right? Or 1, yeah, okay. So you go from a regular password to one that meets the minimum complexity requirements. We add a 1, but then to make it super secure, we add the exclamation point. Why? Top left key on the keyboard, right? Like on my password manager, my default is like a, 15, 20 character uppercase, lowercase, and numbers. I don't use specials because different websites can't handle different special characters, which that blows my mind. But I go to my bank, I give it a 20 character upper, lower, and number. It's like, this is the worst password I've seen in my entire life. Go to the end of that sucker, add the bang, it's like, cool, you're good now. Right, very strong, much strength, right? So at this organization, they were talking about passwords, they wanted to increase the length. So they, in a way, let the will of the people decide. They gave them the option, like our current policy was like 8 characters, and you have to rotate every 90 days, right? And the 90 days, of course, is, according to NIST, Google, blah, 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 is very misguided, but that's a whole separate point. And they're like, hey, we want to move to, I think it was 14 characters. So what they did is they got a pilot group and said, hey, you're going to be 14, and we're not going to force rotation. And what they did is they told the rest of the company, like after they made sure everything worked and there weren't systems that were cratering, which there weren't, they said, hey, everybody else, if you want this 14 character policy, we're going to give you the benefit of not having to rotate. And they had the people who were like, this is what I've always done. It's great. I love using the season and year as my birth as my password, right? And when someone would have to call the help desk to reset their password, somebody else would actually tell them, hey, if you switch to a longer password, you don't actually have to go through this. And it actually organically, from outside security, from the real world people, ended up driving everybody, I think they got to like 90-something% of the people chose the longer password. Versus, imagine if we come down with the edict. You now have to go from 8 to 14 characters, but you don't have to change. And they'll ignore the last part of not having to rotate. But they're gonna grumble, they're gonna be angry, they're gonna talk to their C-level. They're like, I can't remember a 14-character password, which, whatever, I don't believe that. But it actually came from the inside. They moved to the longer passwords, and on top of that, sold it as a benefit. They didn't have to rotate, which is actually the modern guidance anyway. Because we've found with research that over time, with password resets, people sort of spiral down into picking a worse and worse password. Because on a Tuesday, they have to do their reset all of a sudden because they've got an important presentation and they pick the first thing off the top of their head that's the same thing they've used for Netflix for years. Right? Very, very brilliant. I love that. And trade-off's not even the right word for this. They won on both counts and sold it as a benefit, which is really, really cool here. The famous one we used to poke fun at was PCI. PCI used to have an 7-character password requirement, which was astounding. Fortunately, with 4, we've moved to 12, which is, of course, significantly better. Right, because we found longer passwords are better than the stupid complexity requirements. Because we all know to take an A and change it to the ampersand. You're an animal. No, the @ sign. You take an O and you change it to a 0. The L becomes a Z becomes a. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know what the Z becomes. It gets to be a 2. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, all right. Good deal. And this insight, I got some of this from Kyle and talking to some other folks, is we see people who are presenting to their board or the C-levels like, hey, our filtering product, Proofpoint, whatever, has blocked this many emails. I mean, cool. But are you hoping next month to block more? Are you hoping to block less? Like, what is your goal with this other than just saying, I'm important and I do things? Right? Same with like the blocked attacks. How many of you have seen those pew pew maps? Or heard in a news thing, it's like, we block 1 million attacks a day. And you're like, it's a port scan from a kid in his basement playing with Nmap. Oh, but we blocked 1 million attacks a day. Right, but it makes me look important, right? And we can see those little funky maps, right? Versus when we're catching an attack, where are we stopping it in the kill chain? And we want to move that earlier in the process. Not just, I mean, the pew pew maps are complete garbage, but if we're stopping the attack, that's great, right? We're all going to have incidents. What we would like to do is catch those incidents earlier. That's a great metric. And if we're not catching them earlier, why? What can we do different then to move that so we can catch it earlier in the process there, right? I'm so torn on employee phishing. I think it's a base thing you need to do just to keep people on their basic toes. There was a Wall Street Journal article 2 weeks ago talking about how phishing training is not effective. They did say, though, that there was the people who more intensely engaged with phishing training did better on the phishing results. What's the problem with that math, though? We're confusing correlation and causation. They could be the people who are spending more time reading through the phishing training could be the people who are more diligent in following email. So we're assuming the training makes the difference, where it might actually be reversed, where it's the people that makes the difference. I'm not saying we get rid of it, but I'm also like, I ask, people come to me all the time, and I learned this from Brian Strand at Black Hills. They're like, hey, we want to do a phishing assessment. And it's like, cool. Maybe it's to steal John's quote, maybe it's bad capitalism, but I try to steer them away from it to some degree. Because I ask them, I'm like, okay, if 0 people click on the phishing link, what are you going to do next month? And they're like, well, nothing. Okay, if 5 people click on that same thing, what are you going to do different next month? Well, nothing. If 10% click on the phishing email, what are you going to do different next month? And the answer is overwhelmingly nothing. What are we measuring these things for? And I'm not saying it's not important to have the phishing training, but why are we going through all these necessarily steps? The bigger, broader problem, and we see this from time and time again, you hear the famous saying, there's no patch for human stupidity. Ingenuity, I like that one better, right? Stupidity. And we like to blame the users. But is the problem really the user if a single person clicks a phishing email and the entire castle crumbles? When I first heard that, I was like, oh, now that hurts. Now I feel it. Right? Are we catching it early enough? Are we getting responding? Related to that too, I guess it's on a different slide here, is encouraging reporting. I'll come back to that in a second. I think it's on a different slide. Yeah. With the dashboards, and I think the dashboards can be a good tool. Let me phrase that. Dashboards can be a good tool. Out of the box dashboards, many times are not. It takes a lot of time to figure out what should we actually be measuring, what should we actually be doing to adjust, what should we be doing with incentives and things related to that. And we've seen over time, incentives can be very tricky. I love talking about and thinking about incentives. Because it's fascinating research where people actually do the opposite of what you want because you think you're incentivizing one thing and you're actually incentivizing something else. My favorite is the Cobra effect. How many of you have heard of the Cobra effect? A couple people, all right, good deal. So, British government was concerned by the number of cobras in Delhi. I'm concerned about the number of cobras on planet Earth. I don't like snakes, they look very scary, they're big, right? So what they did is they offered a bounty. You bring us a snake, we give you money. And it worked. People are really freaking smart. Oftentimes not in the ways we intended. What happened next? Freaking brilliant. People started raising cobras. Because if they bred cobras, they could now turn in more cobras and make more money. I kind of like this. Also, who the hell raises cobras? Frankly, those people deserve more money. That's just nuts, right? So they began breeding cobras, making cobras. So the government's like, well, now this is terrible, so we got to get rid of this. So they killed the bounty. So people were like, well, now I don't want cobras, which is weird. Now is when I didn't want cobras, not ever, but whatever. And then the breeders said they just set the cobras free. The net result, more cobras. Never a good thing here, right? So they had more cobras than they had before. There was another situation in Hanoi in 1902. There was incentives to get rid of the rats. You bring in a rat tail, you get money. What people did is they would catch the rat, cut the tail off, let it live to make more rats so they could cut more tails off, and the number of rats actually skyrocketed because they were incentivizing the wrong things. And I think the most famous last bullet here is, and I heard about this, I think twice, where developers were incentivized for squashing bugs. So what the developers did is they made bugs that they could very easily fix later, And their bug squashing rate went through the roof until they've realized, hey, we're incentivizing the wrong thing. We're measuring the wrong thing. We're incentivizing this in the incorrect way and causing these issues. Right? We'll see this too on, to some degree, some pen test results. Like, hey, I want to look like I'm important. I'm going to create more of these. I'm going to find more things that aren't necessarily issues, report them, maybe escalate them and make them more important. If any of you ever dealt with bug bounties, this very much fits in there. If I'm submitting a bug bounty, I want it to be more severe because I get paid more money. So there's been a lot more time incentivizing that. And I get it, I don't have necessarily the right fix, but if we understand the problem, we can start working to some degree in the correct direction here. So we always need to revisit what is actually important to us. Yes, we want to get rid of bugs, but are we doing it the right way? Are we measuring it the correct way? Are we incentivizing this the right way? Overall, is the actual security of our organization getting better? How do we know? Are we just looking at the same thing we've always looked at and using that to determine if we're getting better versus number of incidents? Catching the incidents earlier in the attack chain, right? Are we measuring right? Are we causing the correct behavior, or worst case, causing the opposite effect here, right? So that's gonna wrap us up. It's the last talk on Friday. We're gonna finish early. Anybody upset? It's Friday somewhere. Isn't that what they're saying is? Cool. Questions? And now I told you it's the last talk and it's over, and you're like, there's like half of the group is like, nobody ask a damn question or I'm gonna murder you. Yes, sir.
A lot of the time, executives like to see your QQ maps and how many attacks that you're logging on a daily basis. How do you get them to buy into the stuff that actually matters?
So the question here is, a lot of times the executives want to see the pew map. How do you get them to buy into something like this? It comes down to a, I don't know, sales technique in a way. You're like, look, what do you expect us to do differently given the pew map? Like the number of port scans, what are we going to do different tomorrow? Do you want us to have this number go up? What does that actually mean? And when they start digging into some of those pieces, like the blocked emails, do you want more blocked emails? Right, and then they're like, well, yeah. But I'm like, okay, should we sign up for spam sites to increase the number? Should we block more legitimate ones? And sort of dig into those pieces to some degree. Anybody have better ideas? I don't know. Yes?
Give them something else to look at.
Give them something else to look at, ideally shiny. Yeah, distract them. I've learned executives are very much like children. Don't surprise them. They very much like gifts. And you always tell them they're a good boy or a good little girl. It's funny because it's true. Right. Yes, sir?
Have a similar line of thinking, right? You have something that is low risk. You've already evaluated this is not a material concern. But it's on a report somewhere because you have to report and it's there for compliance or whatever. How do you handle, we'll just take it off the report?
Yeah, I mean, so the question here is, let's say we got something that's low and we've properly rescored and evaluated to ensure that it is actually low. What if we have to report that? What do we do with it? I don't know. I can't.
Do we have an option for risk acceptance?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. That's what I was trying to think of. The comment was, what about risk acceptance? Where we're like, look, this isn't a risk. We determined it's low. Let's accept it, get it the hell off the report so it's not cluttering that up and confusing people with too many shiny objects.
Well, I think that's my question, though, is you can explain this is something that's acceptable. You're aware of it. You're accepting it based on awareness. Do you take it off the report? Do you leave it on the report?
So the question is sort of summarize, and if I can remember what you said, is do we leave it on or take it off? I think you should take it off. If we've determined the risk isn't there, I don't need to confuse people with extra information that we've already established is not important to us. Jeff.
To me, I just like to look is if it's something that's important enough to be on the report, informational is a great risk category. Hey, just so you know.
That's a good point. So even a lower category of informational, where you're like, because no one's going to scroll through that, right? Move it to an appendix.
Exactly. That's what I was saying. You move it to another part of the sheet and say these are acceptable risks.
Move it to another part. If it's a worksheet, move it to the other workbook. No one will click on the other tab. Yeah, magic.
It sounds like one of the key factors is stuff that we're already doing that reduces that risk. Right? So that you highlight that this is what we're doing that reduces risk. It's important. We can see that it's important. It's reducing risk. Continue doing the thing. Draw attention to that.
Yeah. So the comment here, and if I summarize this incorrectly, let me know. But we want to also sell back up to the executive, like, hey, look, we are reducing risk. We have focused on these 3 things for this month. We believe it has this kind of impact, and have them look at that. To some degree, the dirty little secret is look over here, not over here, right? And create your own, I don't want to say dashboard, but your own reports where like, look, we made a difference here. Next month, we've got a plan to work on this next thing, plan to work on these next types of things. Is that?
I mean, essentially, if you have the balance between.
Oh, gee, I'm looking down here. I'm like, dude, you're the best ventriloquist of all time. I see this weird head with a. I'm looking down here like, where's the sound coming from? Make it stop. All right, one last question. Okay, sorry, comment.
If you have something that's low risk and you're asking us to take it off.
Dinner time.
Keep it on the report so you can say we're mitigating it this way. So you can say you're not saying we need to address this. You're saying we are addressing it, and we need to continue investing in the things that mitigate the risk.
Yeah, great point. So he's saying if you've got something like that, you said we've mitigated. Also call that out. Be like, we've mitigated this. We're accepting the risk. Here's why, because we've done this other good thing. So with that, dinner bell. We will see you all. Thank you for coming.